So I thought that this episode was fantastic. Sarah Hess, who wrote this episode, is an incredible writer, and people need to leave her alone. It's just an enduring mystery why she, among all the writers on this show, gets the most hate online. We will probably never know the reason why. And I do really love how basically this show is just one giant subtweet of Benioff and Weiss saying that themes are for 8th grade book reports. This show loves a theme. I love a theme. Maybe sometimes there can even be too much theme, but I'd rather too much theme than no theme at all. And since I've said theme so many times, let's talk about some themes. Expressions of grief are central to this episode. We see that with Helaena and Alicent, who are forced to perform grief for the crowd, despite it being the worst possible thing for them emotionally. Now, there is such thing as healthy public expressions of grief. That's why we have funerals or celebrations of life. Coming together and sharing that pain can lessen it. But when you are forced to perform grief for the masses, for people you don't know, it becomes something that is no longer yours.
When the people share our grief, they draw closer to us.
But I don't want them closer. I don't know them.
Sometimes we have to pretend.
The whole funeral sequence reminded me of Princess Diana and these other mass public spectacle funerals. I think that was an inspiration behind this episode. And it made me think of the episodes of the podcast You Are Wrong About, where they talked about Princess Diana and how Michael Hobbs, one of the hosts of the show, was basically saying that he believes that the existence of the royal family is a human rights violation. Because yes, these people are incredibly privileged materially, but their lives can never actually just be their own. In order to court public sympathy, Helaena has to be further traumatized after just witnessing the murder of her son. Thea Saban did just such an incredible job in this scene of showing Helena's panic, how she's in the middle of a crowd and there is nowhere to hide. The people who are there to show support to her are just furthering her trauma because they don't know her and they don't understand what she needs. On the contrast, we see Aegon, whose grief has to be private. He has no wish to be part of the procession, but Otto would never allow it even if he did. As a man and a king in a very patriarchal society, any expression of grief would be seen as weakness, and weakness is something he cannot afford. Aegon is only allowed to express his grief in displays of anger and violence, smashing Viserys' Lego set to bits, going off on his small council, caving a dude's head in with a mace, hanging 100 rat catchers, and then breaking down and sobbing alone in front of a fireplace. You know, the 5 stages of grief. Aegon's need to be seen as a strong man and a strong king shapes the way that he can express and process his grief. So much of power is Varys' shadow on the wall. It's about how you are perceived and whether other people believe that you hold power. Sometimes a ruler may need the public to fear them, but there is a line between being feared and being hated, and Aegon probably crossed that when he killed all those rat catchers. Brian Condell's favorite Song of Ice and Fire novel is A Feast for Crows, which is largely about the horror and devastation that war brings to the small folk. And it's really showing the way that conflicts between royals spiral outwards and destroy other people's lives is on full display. We hear this pretty directly from the brothel madam telling Aemond that when people like him lose their tempers, innocence will pay the price.
I would remind you only that when princes lose their temper, it is often others who suffer. The small folk, like me.
And it already has. His reckless actions caused by his anger have pushed the realm closer to a devastating war. And these royals having super weapons just compounds all of that. We got to see this on a personal level with Hugh the blacksmith and his wife and his sick kid who were suffering due to the blockade. I do think that that was one of the weaker scenes in the episode. I'm glad that we're getting this perspective and this story, but it just felt kind of generic. Of course, we also saw this with the rat catchers. If Aegon hadn't been so eager to shed blood, so to speak, they could have easily identified cheese by doing a lineup or something. And Aegon then compensates for this rash brutality with even more rash brutality, and 99 innocent men pay the price. And we also see this with the Cargill twins, who sacrificed their lives in a harebrained attempt to end a conflict they never started. The rift in the royal family becomes a rift in their family. Familial dysfunction is the heart of this story. Viserys created a rift in his family when he married his daughter's best friend, and that rift just got wider because he just thought it would close on its own. I know, I'll take you out so soon, okay? I'll take you out so soon. Each side of this family has its own generational traumas. The Blacks may be the more stable half, but they are far from a happy family. Daemon completely neglects his daughters, and Bela is understandably quite resentful about that. One of the things that makes Rhaenyra easier to root for is that she has been a caring and nurturing mother to her sons. Viserys was a terrible father, even to Rhaenyra. He was often not there for her when she needed him, but he did show her genuine love, affection, and attention in a way that he never really did with his kids with Alicent. And it also seems like Emma was a wonderful mother, the little we saw of her. And Rhaenyra was able to take that seed and grow it and nurture it in her own children. She is a much better parent than Viserys ever was to her. Rhaenyra was not able to choose whether she became a mother. As the heir, she needed to have her own heirs, but she was able to dictate the terms in a way that Alicent never was. And Laenor and Harwin were not always present father figures, but they were affectionate and supportive to those boys in a way that Viserys never was to his children with Alicent. And that doesn't mean that Jace has no daddy issues. He's got plenty. We hear him wonder if Harwin ever really loved them. Jace would have experienced a great upheaval when he figured out the secret of his parentage and that his whole life was a lie that the whole world knew, but his survival depended on maintaining it. Rhaenyra has to love her sons strongly and fiercely because they were basically in danger from the moment they were born. And as for the Greens, I have discussed how much these people need therapy, and it has never been more apparent. None of them know how to support or show affection for each other, even if they wanted to. Alicent tries to provide comfort to Helena, but ultimately, as she has been taught by her father, she prioritizes duty over her family's emotional well-being. Otto does love his family in his own way, but he still sees them as tools to fulfill a purpose. And I think he thinks that he is doing what is best for them by making sure they attain the highest possible status, but he doesn't consider whether that is actually what they want or need. Alicent has thoroughly replicated her own trauma in her daughter, forcing her to perform her duty the way that she was. Otto cannot or will not provide comfort to her, and she in turn cannot provide comfort to her grieving son. I think she deeply wants to, she just on a fundamental level does not know how. The need for comfort and absolution was also a theme here. Alicent tries to confess to her father. She is literally trying to scrub herself clean of sin. Alicent has devoted her life to duty, and her character arc has basically been a series of moral concessions as that duty becomes more complex. At the start, she is a truly dutiful, if not necessarily nurturing, wife and mother. The first tear in that duty comes when Larys implicates her in the murder of his father and brother. Then, when her son lost an eye and her husband did nothing about it, it reinforced all of her fears for the safety and the future of her children, so she further sullied herself by accepting the alliance with Larys to gain the power she thought she needed to protect them. She wants to protect her son and his claim to the throne, so she covers up his heinous crimes. She slowly builds up years of guilt and self-hatred that she attempts to stifle by becoming more outwardly pious. To be clear, Alicent was not responsible for Blood and Cheese because she was sleeping with Criston. The fault above all lies with the assassins and the man who hired them, but Criston was not on duty at the time, and if he had been, he would have been on Alicent's door, which is across the castle from Helena's. Criston is culpable in that he is the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, and it's literally his job to ensure that the royal family is protected. It is ultimately on him that there were no guards on Helena's door. But that's just basic incompetence that exists well outside of his relationship with Alicent. She is not at fault here, but it is still totally normal to feel guilt and blame yourself, especially for someone like Alicent. Sometimes punishing yourself can be a coping mechanism because it allows you to deflect from a larger grief. We also see that Aemond needs to be comforted. Look, Aemond Targaryen having Oedipal issues is not a surprising reveal in the least. I don't know if I thought it would be this explicit. The whole scene feels very religious coded. There's a shot that literally resembles the Pieta, and the candles are arranged around the bed in a ring like they are in the Sept. And it definitely brings a new dimension to this exchange from episode 9.
He said time to get it wet.
Every woman is an image of the mother, to be spoken of with reverence.
Confessing guilt may be an emotional release, but it also makes you vulnerable, and it is a bit jarring to see a character who is usually so guarded laid bare like this. I have to say that I'm still not sold on the sapphire eye effect. I don't think it's all the way there. There was something that looked a bit uncanny about the way that the eyelid was twitching, kinda. Maybe part of why they're using it so sparingly is just because it's expensive, but I do think it makes it more impactful when we do see it, and it makes sense for the character that he would cover up the worst of his scars most of the time. Sometimes a person reaches a point where they believe that absolution is impossible for them, and we see that with cristoncole projecting his guilt onto Eric, and then also with Eric at the end of the episode begging for Rhaenyra's forgiveness before he literally falls on his sword. Cristoncole is easily the most hated character on this show, despite other characters doing much worse things, and that comes down to his self-righteousness and his projection. He cannot take accountability for his own actions, and he forces it onto others.
What I think has no relevance!
You have brought disgrace upon our ranks. And now you must restore it.
I think he reminds people of all the things that they hate the most about themselves, and the misogynistic language doesn't help either. Even if you think that he has valid reasons to dislike Rhaenyra, it's just gross. I honestly don't hate him. I am not typically someone who hates fictional characters. I don't really know what it is. It takes a lot for me to hate a character, and it's usually very subjective and vibes based. Ultimately, the fault for Blood and Cheese lies with Daemon, the man who hired the assassins, but cristoncole does bear some responsibility because he is the one who was responsible for there not being any guards on Helena's door. As I said earlier, I don't think this has anything to do with his affair with Alicent, because Alicent's chambers are across the castle on a whole other level. So it's right for him to feel guilty about this. It is absurd that there was no one protecting the queen and the heir. He believes that there is no forgiveness for what he has done, so he takes a desperate stab at ending this conflict, so maybe no one else on his side will get hurt. Because Criston does care about Alicent and her children, and he wants to protect them. He's just very bad at his job. What he did is still awful and resulted in a horrible tragedy, but it did almost work. If Missaria hadn't spotted Eric coming up the beach, he would have killed Rhaenyra. This episode had 3 major showdowns. The Eric battle, I honestly don't have that much to say about, other than I thought it was an incredible scene. This is why they actually had to cast real identical twins in these roles, and they couldn't do what they're doing with Tyland and Jason Lannister. Eric's death by falling on his sword because he could not live with what he had done was incredibly powerful and moving, and I think that was a great decision. The battle between these two brothers is the dance of the dragons writ small, and it goes to show how neither side can really win. Eric may have survived the fight, but there was no going forward for him, having killed his beloved brother. I absolutely loved the Daemon v. Rhaenyra divorce scene. Emma Darcy and Matt Smith were both incredible, and I am so glad that Rhaenyra is finally acknowledging what kind of a person Daemon really is. I'm very glad that they are leaning into Daemon just being a complete piece of shit this season. Matt Smith's inherent charisma and Daemon getting some cool badass moments where he does neat beheadings and says one-liners afterwards did distract a lot of people from how truly awful he is. But make no mistake, Daemon Targaryen has always been a bum. I really enjoy his character, but he's just the worst. There were some great comedy moments with Daemon from this episode, with this whole, what, me attitude.
I was clear in my instructions. Aemond, the brother of Aegon the usurper. I'm not on my way even now to Harrenhal to raise an army in your name, Rhaenyra!
It should be clear to everyone that while Daemon may not have explicitly told Blood and Cheese to go after Jaehaerys, it was an acceptable outcome of his plan, if not part of its design. He is ultimately responsible for what happened to this 4-year-old child, and he shows no remorse and takes no accountability for his actions. This is something that sets him apart from his one-eyed twink doppelganger, because Aemond at least admits remorse for what he's done. Daemon's violence towards Rhaenyra is absolutely consistent with both his book and show characterization. Daemon is an incredibly violent man who groomed his niece. It completely follows that he would be violent towards her. I also laughed out loud when Daemon said that Viserys was afraid that his greatness would outshine his own.
Or did he merely use you as a tool to put me in my place because he was afraid of me? Because he knew your legacy, unlike mine, would never outshine his own?
He was not afraid of you, Daemon! He could not trust you.
Rhaenyra is absolutely right to point out that this was not the case, that it was because Viserys did not trust him. But Daemon is also right to point out that Viserys did not make Rhaenyra heir because of some inherent virtue on her part, but because he wanted to prevent Daemon from getting that power. We literally heard this from Viserys himself.
I named her to protect the realm from Daemon.
Viserys definitely did not trust Daemon, but I don't think he ever truly trusted Rhaenyra either. If he truly believed in Rhaenyra, he would have made her the heir from the start, not just after he thought that he would never have a trueborn son and he was mad at Daemon. It was also amazing to see my lovely noodle boy Caraxes again. I think that the dragon effects have improved in this season, and I'm so pumped that they are finally going to Harrenhal. The Harrenhal plotline may be the thing that I am most looking forward to this season, and I'm so excited to get there. Of course, the other big showdown in this episode was Aegon versus Otto. Look, I'm just going to say this. I'm going to speak my truth here. This is the hottest Otto Hightower has ever been.
Insolent pup. He was right about you.
He made me king.
Is that what you think?
Rhys Ifans was absolutely incredible in this scene. It was so great to see a character who is usually so reserved and restrained just to let loose like that.
The king is my grandson, and my grandson is a fool.
Tom Glencarney also got another incredible comedy moment.
He's pretending to be his own twin. Brilliant.
gods help us all.
Otto has always prioritized the political gain of his family over their well-being. And he has convinced himself, I think, that this is doing right by them, but he has never really seen Aegon as a person, just a puppet for his own power. Otto is absolutely right about Aegon's flaws, and he is 100% correct to go off on him for murdering 100 people, but he also never actually prepared Aegon for the position that he forced him into. If he had actually tried to understand and guide his grandson, things might have turned out differently, but he basically just pushed him into the deep end and expected him to beg for a life raft. As abhorrent as Aegon's actions are here, and as terrifying the prospect of cristoncole as Hand of the King is, I really can't blame Aegon for firing his grandfather here. Otto just assumed for some reason that he would be able to manipulate Aegon, so he never prepared him for the task. Yes, Otto wasn't present for a lot of Aegon's childhood, but he was back in King's Landing from the time Aegon was like 15 to 21 years old. He had an opportunity to help him out. Maybe like Alicent, he just didn't know how to handle Aegon because no one in this family knows how to do shit, but he still left him wholly unprepared for the position he forced him into. It was moving, if a little ironic, to hear Otto waxing poetic about Viserys' legacy. I have always headcanoned that Otto was super gay for Daemon, and that was part of the enmity between them, but maybe he was also kind of gay for Viserys. And Otto is looking at Viserys through rose-colored glasses here. Yes, he was judicious and dignified, but his indecision and refusal to take action is what left his entire family in this mess. It seems like the show may be trying to paint Rhaenyra as the happy medium between Viserys' indecision and Aegon's restless cruelty, but we'll have to see a little more of where the show is going with that. And it is amazing to see Aegon get called out for the piece of shit he is, even if I can sympathize with his circumstances. Now I just have some unstructured thoughts and observations. The first one, where are the cats? So in the book, after Aegon hangs all of the rat catchers, Otto brings 100 cats into the Red Keep, but now Otto has been fired before he could bring in the cats. So who's going to bring in the cats now? Cristoncole? He sucks at his job. The people demand 100 cats. Ryan Condal and SARA HESS are ruining my life. I take back every single nice thing I've ever said about them. I also loved Otto calling Criston's twin gambit a prank.
And you acceded to this prank without consulting me.
I love shenanigans and hijinks, and I'm glad that the show is embracing them. We got the Scooby-Doo ass secret doors last week. End of the first season, we got Aemon's all-time great prank of let me make you think you're going to get eaten by a dragon. Didn't fully land things on the execution there. The key is to not actually get someone eaten by a dragon, but still a solid heckle. I also wanted to talk about Rhaenyra refusing to send Jace to keep an eye on King's Landing, but sending Baela. Jace is her heir, and the last time she sent her sons out on a dragon mission, one of them died, so it is very understandable. It also goes to show that she does trust Baela. Baela seems honored that Rhaenyra has put this trust in her, but she is also seen as more expendable. Hello to Adam of Hull. What's up? I don't have much to say about Adam and Alan that isn't spoilery, but I am looking forward to talking more about them in the coming weeks. I also would love to talk more about Mysaria and Larys at some point. I think they are both fascinating characters. While they may be working with their respective teams, I think it's fair to say they both have their own agendas, which I am looking forward to learning more about. Also, we got a Darren mention, you guys! I fully leapt up and did the fist thing from the end of the Breakfast Club. I was so excited. Darren is real. We're probably not going to meet him this season, but he exists, and he has a dragon. Rhaenyra's little sons, Aegon and Viserys, have a dollhouse that is shaped like a little mini dragonstone, and I thought that was very cute. I thought it was very funny how quickly Sir Laurent got out of his armor. He was even out of the padded jacket that the Kingsguard wear under their armor. Dude clearly wanted a break. This is something that's kind of from last week that I forgot to mention, but we did get a dragon pit mention in this episode, and I really want to know where Vhagar lives because she is too big for the dragon pit. Does she have like a berth in the harbor or something? And all the sailors are like, yeah, you gotta make sure you get to the harbor early so you don't end up with the parking spot next to Vhagar. One of the tactical disadvantages to having a dragon that big is that she takes a lot longer to get off the ground. She kind of needs to make a running start, and she makes crash landings, so you need to have sufficient space for that. I know there are some smaller islands in Blackwater Bay where she could maybe live, but you would definitely want her to be closer to the city. Although it would be funny if it was like, oh no, Rhaenyra's attacking the city. Cut to Aemond in a little rowboat just going out to get to Vhagar. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, etc. I am very excited for the next episode. We are finally going to Harrenhal. I love a spooky haunted castle. It's gonna be great.